Good evening, everyone. I'm Joanne Myers, and on behalf of the Carnegie Council, I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this very special evening as we welcome the eminent Harvard scholar, Dr. Graham Allison. Tonight, he will be discussing his very timely book entitled Destined for War: Can America and China Escape Thucydides Trap?
The book tonight does three things. First, it introduces you to a great thinker. And before you're done tonight, those of you who haven't met him before will be reintroduced to a great thinker. It presents a big idea, and it imposes a consequential question. So the great thinker is Thucydides. Thucydides wrote the first ever history book. History defined as a accurate account of what happened and why, without any interference from spirits or myths or other external themes of the sort that Herodotus was given to including in his story. So Thucydides just tried to get the facts right, and he did so in a famous book on classical Greece called The History, that's why he calls that the name, of the Peloponnesian War. And you can actually go download that for free. Read just book one, the first 100 pages. If it doesn't knock your socks off every other page, check your pulse. Okay, so this is a very, very thoughtful fellow. So Thucydides. The big idea is an idea that was said I coined about, I don't know, 6 years ago, called Thucydides Trap. A metaphor to make vivid Thucydides' insight. So this is his idea, not Graham's idea, that when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, like Athens impacted Sparta, which had been the dominant power in Greece for 100 years, or Germany impacted Britain 120 years or so ago. That was the roll-up to World War I, even though Britain had been the dominant power for a century, or China is impacting the US today. So when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, in general, poop happens. Okay? So Thucydides' trap is the dangerous dynamic that occurs in this interaction between a rising power that's threatening to displace a ruling power. And in the book, I review the last 500 years of history. I found 16 cases of this phenomena, of which, say, the rise of Germany and its impact on Britain is a good example. In 12 of these cases, the outcome was war. In 4 of the cases, the outcome was not war. So to say that under these conditions war is inevitable would be mistaken. And this book does not say war is inevitable. To say that under these conditions war is possible, even likely, even that the odds are against us, would be accurate. So that's Thucydides' trap. And finally, the question is the subtitle of the book that's already been mentioned, which is, can America and China escape Thucydides' trap? And that's, I think, the question. So why don't I take about 20 minutes left to organize my comments around as answers to 3 questions. So I'll give you 3 questions. For each of them, I'll give you the tweet size answer in respect of Washington today. And then I'll say a little bit more, since we have a little bit more time than a tweet. Okay. So question 1. What has been the most significant geopolitical event in the last 25 years? Second question. What will be the most significant geostrategic challenge for the U.S. for the next 25 years? So from this point, looking forward as far as anybody can see. And third, this nagging question: can America and China escape Thucydides Trap? So first, the tweet size answers. The geopolitical event of the last 25 years has been the rise of China. Never before has a country risen so far, so fast, on so many different dimensions. Indeed, for those of you who haven't been watching, the first chapter of the book gives you a good jolt. And I quote former Czech President Václav Havel's wonderful comment: things have happened so fast, we haven't yet had time to be astonished. So I would say, look at the facts and be astonished. Looking forward the next 25 years, or as far as anybody can see, the geostrategic challenge will be, my tweet, the impact of the rise of China on the US and on Americans' sense of our role in the world, and on the international order that the US constructed and has largely underwritten for the last 7 decades. So the impact of the rise of China on the US and the international order. So finally, can America and China escape Thucydides Trap? The third question. There, the book retreats to the professorial perch. Actually, that's my job most of the time, and answers decisively no and yes. Okay? So let me explain. So no, if we insist on business as usual in relations with China, and that's, I think, what we've seen the last 20 years under both Republicans and Democrats, then we should expect history as usual. History as usual in this case would be war, indeed, God forbid, a catastrophic war. So no, if we insist on business as usual. But yes, we can escape Thucydides' trap if we take seriously Santayana's insight, in which he said, only those who refuse to study history are condemned to repeat it. So we're not obliged to make the mistakes that the Kaiser made in 1914, or that Pericles made in 431 when Corcyra and Corinth got into a conflict. So there are plenty of mistakes that others have made that we don't necessarily have to repeat, though we will do if we just do business as usual. So no and yes. Let me say a few more words about each, but that's the frame. So to the first question, the biggest geopolitical event the last 25 years, the rise of China. If you haven't been watching, I think you'll find this 20 pages, the chapter 1 on the rise of China, a jolt. And when I do the presentation of it with slides, I would show you the slide of the bridge that goes across the Charles River in Cambridge between the Kennedy School and the business school. It's called the Anderson Bridge. I can see this bridge out of my office. So the renovation of this bridge, the discussion of it began when I was dean of the Kennedy School, and I quit being dean in 1989. The construction project began in earnest in 2012 and was declared to be a 2-year project. In 2014, it was declared it wasn't finished. That was obvious for anybody to see with the big traffic jams, and they said it would take 1 more year. In 2015, they said it wasn't finished. It would take 1 more year. In 2016, they said, we're not going to tell you when it's going to be finished. Okay? But it was already 3 times over budget. And now, actually, all the traffic works on it. They just still haven't quite finished it. There's a bridge in Beijing that I drove across 2 months ago when I was there, called the Sanyan Bridge, S-A-N-Y-A-U-N. It's got 3 times more lanes of traffic than the Anderson Bridge, so it's bigger. Okay. In 2015, the Chinese decided they wanted to renovate the Sanyan Bridge. How long did it take to complete that project? 43 hours. 43 hours. Now I know in New York, the 2nd Avenue subway only took, so you're not like Boston, okay? How many miles of high-speed rail has the US successfully constructed that are operating today? Answer, 0. Okay. And we have one project that's actually been very active. It's from San Francisco to Los Angeles. It was started 10 years ago, and it was announced to be done in 2017. It was then announced that it might be finished in 2029. That's the current estimate. And many people in California think that it'll never be finished. Yeah? In the same 10-year period, when we were not building the 500 miles, China built, and they're now operating, how many miles of high-speed rail? 16,000. Okay. In fact, most Americans don't know that China today has the largest national economy, bigger than the American economy. Well, no, that can't be. I read in the paper always that, China is the second largest economy. Go to the IMF website. Go to the CIA website. Take the yardstick they regard as the single best yardstick for comparing national economies. That's called purchasing power parity. You'll see China's economy is today bigger than America's economy, than the US economy. Well, that shouldn't be. I don't like that. I think our economy should be the biggest economy. Well, that's good. I like that too. But the facts are hard to deny. So the first proposition is that what's happened literally in the 25 years that, we're old enough to remember where we were 25 years ago. So while we have hardly been watching, this meteoric rise has just in every dimension. And China will be rivaling and in many domains surpassing the US over this period of time, as it already has been and for some time to come. So that's the past, looking to the future. The geostrategic challenge, as I said, it's the impact of this. And this is really, again, Thucydides' idea. So I'm the ruling power. Sparta, Britain. I've been the ruling power, US, for 100 years. So this is natural. This is the way things should be. They were all my life. Actually, this is a good way for things to be. So this is not just the status quo, this is the international order. Actually, it's the international order we constructed and we've maintained. And without this international order, you, upstart, wouldn't even have had a chance to become an upstart. So actually, the Asian order that the US has provided for the 7 decades since World War II, the economic and security order, has provided the environment that's enabled all of the Asian miracles. They would not have occurred in the absence of that. And nobody has benefited more from this than China. So when I was working in the US government, I often explained to them why they should be so grateful for this. And they should, I think. Indeed, we try to explain to them why they should help pay for it. They should share more responsibilities. And they say, as Athens said to Sparta, but you put all this in place before we even got here. You didn't take account of our interests because we didn't even count when you established this order. As the Chinese tell us, you wrote the rules for what is the IMF and what is the World Bank and what is the alliance structure. You didn't consult us. So in this dynamic, the rising power naturally feels I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I deserve more say, I deserve more sway. This current situation is unfair. Doesn't really rate my interest, consistent with my size and scale. We are finally now standing up to be big and strong the way we always were until some foreigners showed up about 200 years ago, these Europeans with technology, and they humiliated us, and the Americans came on to help. But now we're bigger, we're stronger, so we're standing up for ourselves. And the ruling power, the US, says, wait a minute, you're trying to upset the status quo. Indeed, you're trying to undo the whole international order. And what are the consequences of that going to be? And that story is as old as history itself. Okay? And we can see how those dynamics work. So I describe those in the book, and you can see the elements of it, but I think the impact of the rise of China on American sense even of who we are and our role in the world, you can already see in part. This book was not written with Donald Trump in mind. Actually, it was completed before he was elected. But I have in the preface just 2-3 pages that note that Thucydides wouldn't be all that surprised at the campaign that was run and even the election of somebody like Trump, because he would say ruling powers become insecure and they become fearful. Even in the extreme, they can become paranoid. Remember what in Greek goes right after fear comes extreme and paranoid. And in the campaign, the principal obstacle to American greatness, according to Donald Trump, was China, which has been raping our economy, he said, and so forth and so on. This impact, I think, we haven't seen the end of. We're actually only seeing the beginnings of. But I think anybody who missed China's ambition to stand tall and be strong in the East. And as I explained in the book, and this comes from Lee Kuan Yew, who was the person that knew China the best, he's to the question, are these folks serious about displacing the US as the predominant power in Asia in the foreseeable future? I have in the book. He says, of course, why not? Who could expect them to do otherwise? How could they not want to be the dominant power in Asia? But wait a minute, but we're the dominant power in Asia. And our dominance has provided this environment that so there's the rub. Okay. Finally, can America and China escape Thucydides' trap? So Thucydides' idea is not, so let me make sure what it's not. It is not that because the rising power is getting bigger and stronger, it says, I'm big, I'm strong, it's time for me to attack you. And it's not because the ruling power says, well, look at this upstart. He's already almost as big as I am. If I leave him alone, tomorrow he's going to be even stronger. I better fight him now. That's not what happens. What happens is, caught in this dangerous dynamic, third-party actions become provocations to which one or the other feels obliged to react, to which the other primary actor feels obliged to respond, which then lead to a cascade, often dragging people where they don't want to go. So how did the assassination of an archduke in 1914 produce a conflagration that burned out the whole of Europe? I mean, at the end of which it was so devastated that historians had to create a whole new category. That's why it's called World War I. It's a puzzle. I mean, I have a good chapter on it in the book. It's a question I've asked for, since I was a student at Harvard. I still can't believe it. I can't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. After the war, every one of the principal actors had lost what he cared about most. So the Austro-Hungarian emperor is trying to hold his empire together. Empire's dissolved, he's gone. Russian Tsar is trying to back the Serbs. His whole regime been overthrown by the Bolsheviks, the communists. Kaiser is trying to back his only ally in Vienna. He's been tossed out. France is military allied with Russia. It's been bled of its youth for a whole generation, never recovers as a player in international affairs. And Britain, which had been a creditor for 100 years, has been turned into a debtor and is on a slow slide to decline. So if you'd given people a chance for a do-over, nobody would have chosen this. But they did, and it happened. So who is our best candidate for a provocateur in the current dynamic between US and China? Kim Jong-Un. Could Kim Jong-un drag the US and China into war? Never. It's impossible. I asked this for the PLA Senior Colonel's Academy when I was there 2 months ago. This young colonel said, absolutely not. No way. He said, Nobody in China wants to have a war with the U.S., not one person. Everybody knows it would be catastrophic. And he said, I study U.S. Nobody in U.S. wants a war with China. They know that would be crazy. So it can't happen. So I said, well, I thank you. But when I've studied, it says, you know, Chinese study history a lot. Anybody else have a view? So this other senior colonel, he said, let me answer. Of course they could. The reason why, of course they could, they already did. This already happened in 1950. The young man said, I wasn't born. That's okay. I can't help that. Okay. In 1950, North Korea attacked South Korea. South Korea was almost overrun. U.S. came to rescue last minute, pushed the North Koreans right back up the peninsula, right across the 38th parallel. MacArthur thought he was going to finish all the business by Christmas and we were coming home. Korea was going to be unified. Out of the blue came 300,000 Chinese, and then another 500,000. Beat us right back down the peninsula to the 38th parallel where the armistice. So tens of thousands of Americans, hundreds of thousands of Chinese, millions of Koreans died in this war. Most of the Americans were killed by Chinese. Most of the Chinese were killed by Americans. Did anybody want a war between the U.S. and China? No. Mao had only the year before barely consolidated control of China. The U.S. was Superman. We had just dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki 5 years before to end World War II. So the idea of you're going to attack Superman, I mean, forget about it. But they did, and it happened. So watch this space. In the months immediately ahead, either Kim Jong-Un is going to conduct more ICBM tests, and after the next series or the series after that, but not a year, before a year's out, he's going to have the ability to strike San Francisco and Los Angeles with a nuclear warhead. So that's inconceivable, but I'm telling you that's a fact. Or somebody's going to attack him to prevent this from happening. Or there's going to be a miracle. So I'm praying for a miracle, okay, but that's hard to count on. Well, how bad would it be if Kim Jong-Un can be able to attack San Francisco or Los Angeles with a nuclear weapon? Well, for folks in San Francisco, this is a big event, okay? But he's not going to stop when he can only do that. He's going to continue working on his program. Pretty soon, he'll be able to get a nuclear weapon to New York, oh my God, or Boston, yikes. Is he going to attack us? No, because he knows we would respond and destroy his society. But if he succeeds in having the ability to attack us, what else is he going to do? Or, and this is exactly what Donald Trump told Xi Jinping when they first met, which was in Mar-a-Lago in April, he said to him, you can solve this problem. You're a big country, this is a little country right beside you, you can solve this problem. But if you don't solve this problem, I'm going to solve the problem, because I'm telling you, there's no way in hell Kim Jong-un is going to be able to attack America with nuclear weapons. But he said, but if I do it, you're not going to like it. So he served him chocolate cake. This was the opening dinner. He excused himself, went to the room next door, and announced that the U.S. had just launched 59 cruise missiles against Syria, just to make the point of how we might do this. Okay? So will Trump attack North Korea in the months immediately ahead? He might. And if he does, will the North Koreans attack Seoul? Almost certainly. And if they attack Seoul, will we then destroy the artillery and the rockets that can do more damage to Seoul? Probably. And if we do that, will we have a second Korean War? Likely. If we have a second Korean War, will China become a combatant? Likely. And you think, well, this is crazy. 1950 was pretty crazy too, okay? Crazy things happen. So to conclude, the purpose of this book is not to be fatalistic. It's not to be pessimistic. I'm inherently optimistic. It is to say the dangerous dynamic that we find ourselves in creates extreme danger that we wouldn't otherwise face or wouldn't otherwise recognize. And under conditions of extreme danger, one requires extreme actions, more imagination than you would normally have. So business as usual, no, you got to stretch imaginations. More adaptability than one would normally have. So I'm hoping what the book will do is help the thinking American community and the American policy community first recognize, yes, this is extremely dangerous. There's no simple way to escape these conditions. This is going to be a chronic condition for years to come, decades probably to come. And to deal with it successfully, we will have to have as much imagination and as much adaptability as, for example, the US displayed in creating what was ultimately the Cold War strategy. So it's not like this is beyond human capacity, not even beyond American capacity, just not normal. So can the US and China escape Thucydides Trap? The answer is no and yes.
Well, on behalf of all of us, you can see how grateful we were for giving us so much time and your insight. Thank you so much.
For more on this program and other Carnegie Ethics Studio productions, visit carnegiecouncil.org. There you can find video highlights, transcripts, audio recordings, and other multimedia resources on global ethics. This program is made possible by the Carnegie Ethics Studio and viewers like you.